meet up the next time you're here then.
Cool, definitely.
It is a little bit overcast today, but it's quite warm.
Okay. I kind of got used to the long dark nights, the very, very long dark nights in Glasgow, and I think that was the only downside of the city, that in the summer you kind of didn't get any darkness, or like half an hour of sort of darkness. And obviously December, January, February, dark skies until maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, or well, 9:30, I would say.
Shall we? There's people dripping in. Shall we get started?
Yes,
the time.
Let's go.
So thanks everyone for joining us. This is the first webinar of a series that we're setting up off the back of the Midlands Research Culture Network. Representatives from Midlands universities kind of let us know that there was a few niche topics that they wanted to explore in a bit more depth with, people who've got a bit of experience in the areas to help you with various research culture issues, topics, whatever in your institution. So for the first one today, we're joined by Susanna Goh from the University of Nottingham, who is working as Programme Director on Digital Nottingham. And then we'll be followed by Dr. Fraser Rowan from the University of Glasgow, who's the Knowledge Exchange and Innovation Manager. So I'll hand over to Susanna.
Oh, hello, everybody. It's lovely to see you, and it's lovely to be here to talk with our network. As Ellen said, my name is Susanna Goh. I'm Programme Director, but the role has moved on a little bit. So I'm really responsible for creating a knowledge exchange offer for the University of Nottingham, between Nottingham and fellow partners in education, industry, public services and civil society, concentrating on inclusive growth. So very much socioeconomic inclusion. So what I'm going to talk with you about today, and I'm going to present first of all, and then hopefully we can discuss and receive questions, is obviously research culture without borders. But I think my kind of exam question, and what I've answered in my presentation, is about working as universities across other sectors and other partners. So what I'm going to do is either shrink to a sort of 1-inch postage stamp effigy, hopefully, and present. So Ellen, I've got 15 or 20 minutes.
20 and then 10 Q&A.
20. Okay then, cool. Okay. So just let me know if you can see my screen. Just going to load up PowerPoint now. Ooh. Okay. Okay, can you see one slide?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I will continue. Okay, so there's me, and I'm talking about enhancing the research and knowledge exchange ecosystem. So a little bit about me, and I would love to meet all of you guys as well, is that, as you can see, I am Chinese. I have a mixed background. My heritage hails from the southern part of China, but I grew up largely in Germany and in Britain. And so what you'll see in terms of that lovely riverside view was the view from my childhood home in a town called Minden in Westphalia in northwest Germany. I have various other pictures. The colourful houses are from my father's neighbourhood in Katong in Singapore. And these wonderful, lovely men and these fighting women represent my mother's heritage, and the black and white photo is actually about 50 meters away from her home on Pok Phillip Road in Hong Kong. So bit of mixed heritage, which kind of in some ways influenced my work in relation to socio-technical, socio-economic innovation and research and knowledge exchange, really focusing on kind of intercultural collaboration and diversity. So that's just a bit about me. In terms of my professional background, which you might find more interesting, I've spent a lot of my life working with and in higher education institutions and within industry and government. I suppose if I could pick 3 things that I've been doing over the course of my career, they have been looking at R&KE within smart and connected cities, so the digital and cultural offering, as represented by that lovely photo of Birmingham from above, from a helicopter. I also have spent quite a lot of my time on healthy aging and health innovation, health technologies. The picture of the family taking a photo in a green environment in a historical building, I thought was quite a nice explanation of some of the work that I've been doing on creating green and sustainable places, but also I've worked extensively with the construction industry as well. The 4th area that I want to mention that's really influenced my life, and the one I probably think about every single day, is the work I've been doing with communities, both industry communities, so business clusters, but also grassroots communities. Really had a lot of fun and joy working with communities. First of all, in my 20s in inner and outer city Glasgow, and also in Birmingham, and now Nottingham. So that's a little bit about me. So in terms of the things that you're probably most interested to hear now, research and knowledge exchange beyond the university. Now, in the university, we sort of live in our own ecosystem, and that's quite exciting. We have sort of professional services, academic teams, different faculties doing great things, all really contributing to society. I don't think there is one particular academic field that says, actually, we're not socially connected. We don't do things for the greater good. So what you have is thousands of people together, both staff and students, working on things that can really benefit society. And our perception of R&KE can be very, very Panglossian, optimistic, looking like this diagram here with sort of interconnected layers and pretty colors. Everything's really logical, and what we do is for the good of humankind. So it all seems neat because it's a bit like mom and apple pie. But actually, all those of you who work across partners within the university and out beyond the university itself will be like this cat staring at balls and balls of yarn, wool in different colors, all intermingled. That's actually reality. R&KE can be messy and untidy. And in terms of generating value and outcomes and impacts that really, really are impactful and make sense, that everyone's pleased with, it's not quite this lovely diagram here. So with the experience that I've talked about in construction, greening the economy, healthy aging and innovation, and creating smart cities, I've kind of pulled together all of the language, value, and expectation aspects that we need to look at when we are working with other partners outside of universities, or are actually external partners to universities, kind of working with them for the first time. There is a lot here, but I hope this will be a useful tool for you, because what I tend to do when I start some research and knowledge exchange work is to have a look at who comes around the table, who we'd like to invite and who would like to be invited, and have a look at how they see things like, for example, value, benefit, diversification, whether they're interested in inclusion and what that means, what growth means for them, growth of the human mindset, or is it economic growth? So just trying to put about 20 years of experience into a few slides. What I'd like you to think about is the partners that you want to work with and the partners that you do work with, and the kind of things that are priorities for them. Because as I said, when we do R&KE as universities, we assume that because we want the best for humans, everybody thinks the same, thinks of values in the same way, and will be automatically grateful for what we do. But as we'll discover, what we do is not just the end point, the outcomes and impacts that we deliver, but also the way that we work together and what we deliver along the journey. Now, I've sort of broken down, I suppose, interest groups into segmentations. Now, when I go through these, please don't think that all businesses think in the same way, all citizens think in the same way. Ultimately, as humans and as communities of universities or businesses, we're a bit of everything, but I've pulled up some major themes. So essentially, when you pull major themes up, what you have to understand is there are many stakeholders that might come into your line of sight that you'll collaborate with, but you ultimately have to kind of, I suppose, segment your stakeholder priorities. Now, it's good for you. I put this picture in of this baby who clearly is being fed by their caregiver or parent, and they're clearly not liking what they're being fed. And I think it's important as universities always to step back and say, oh, okay, well, if we think it's good for people, before we get going, when we're doing our project development, program initiative development, what does good look like? So for industry, what is success? What is good? Let's jumping ahead. Success is products and service innovation, and that's often at speed. I think one of the key things about working at a university and working in industry is that what we understand as quick within institutions is very, very diverse. Businesses function for profit, but more than not, they are functioning for social good. For example, I've worked with people within retail, particularly companies like sort of John Lewis, and as you know, that each of their members of staff are actually partners. They have a stake in the business, and they love to do things for their local communities. The people that they work for are customers and shareholders. So clearly, they're looking at customer satisfaction and loyalty as well as profit. The public sector. Now, this is public sector from local authorities to hospitals to mental health services, etc., etc. So success looks kind of different for the public sector than it does for industry, but some of the kind of key drivers are the same. It's not so much profit that they're after, but value for money innovation, either to do things with less money, and public sector is pretty squeezed at the moment. They're interested in service quality, but also there's a big kind of legal requirement. So they have to operate within law, policy, and procedures. And really, that mix isn't kind of like, let's invent, let's be innovative, but let's deliver services, but they have to comply with lots of different frameworks. So when you look at success, it's not just creating innovation for people, but it's how do we comply? And their users are citizens and service users, not customers. Although this is a misnomer, you kind of see this word appear, customers. Now, customers in terms of public services are not the same as customers of somewhere like John Lewis or Tesco, for example. So sometimes you'll see and hear that your partners articulate a certain language, but always ask them, what exactly do you mean by that? Because sometimes interpretations of words are different. So moving swiftly on, I'll cover this very briefly. I've distinguished public services from public sector because actually when we think about services such as the NHS, sort of GP surgeries, dental practices, community services, we're not just talking about this kind of like service user relationship, but health, wellness, safety, sometimes societally active communities and community development departments and housing departments. So if you guys are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you'll know that now we're talking about public services. It's not just the sort of the physiological aspects and the functional aspects, but some public services look at really important things. What does it mean to be human? Self-realization, human value, and who are their users? They are citizens who should be included, citizens that we collaborate with, and citizens that participate in society. So you can see, just to reflect on some of these kind of I suppose partner groups, that we're looking at different perceptions of value, and that's what we have to consider always as universities, that value, what good looks like, what success looks like, and outcomes and impacts tends to vary from partner to partner, but also segment to segment. So moving very quickly on, we don't always collaborate with big organizations. A lot of the time we're collaborating more and more with grassroots communities. I mean, in terms of kind of REF and KEF, social impact is not just what we do with the local authority, but how we work with our local communities. And University of Nottingham, I mean, it has a strapline, the University of Without Borders. So we want to be very much part of the citizen community, and really serving our local communities and working alongside, not just for. So again, those who are fans of Maslow's hierarchy of needs will understand that citizens don't just want to be experimented upon. I've heard of research projects going really badly because citizens have said, this was a 2-year project and academics just parachuted in and then they kind of went out and then we never saw them again. Universities, and I'm sure your institutions are just the same, they want to be part of the fabric. They want to give to the fabric of the cities, towns, rural areas of which they are part. So there's an expectation that we look at health, well-being, and human thriving as well. So very quickly, just to round off, I'm sure quite a lot of you will have worked with the third sector. So I mentioned human thriving. So the third sector is about probably all 5 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, from physiological to self-actualization. Some third sector organizations are very business-like, focused on surplus and what's done, and that they work in that they maybe sell products rather than services. Others will be very geared towards providing services that empower and create prosperity and inclusion for their local communities. Now, we've talked about values and talked about things quite positively, and you're thinking, ooh, there's a lot to absorb. And we've talked about the good stuff. Actually, what does value look like? What does success look like? But actually, in reality, life can look a bit like this: conflict. Conflict, in every single project that I've worked on, there has been conflict. And what I want us to remember in this group here, is that conflict is actually a stepping stone to growth. I mean, I looked up 2 women fighting, Chinese or something, because Kung Fu was actually invented in my maternal family's home city of Foshan. So claim to fame, anyone who likes Kung Fu. But if we make assumptions, they may not, they're fighting, they're doing Kung Fu, but they may actually be training one another, helping one another, or they may be keeping fit together as friends. We don't know. So I'd like you to see conflict in that way, that it's not just antagonism and anger. It sometimes is constructive. So how do we manage conflict between partners? Well, to handle conflict, there are 3 key principles. It's always present. It's not going to go away. We don't live in this wonderful heaven-like universe. Trade-offs sometimes need to happen. Basically, everyone's going to be slightly unhappy at some point. Hopefully it doesn't boil off into anger and disgruntledness, but in developing value and in working together, we need to realize that it's not always going to be plain sailing. So what I always look at is something that I've nicknamed the conflict pyramid. Feel free to copy this, because this is my thinking. It's not established by some wonderful psychologist somewhere. There are 3 levels of conflict. First one is pain. So disagreement, pain. Something is wrong with the why, the what, the how, the when. We could just be antagonistic and settle for dissonance, which will ultimately destroy what we do in R&KE, or we can actually challenge ourselves to grow and recognize conflict. I think a key thing, and I've just discussed things with particularly my colleagues, Harry and Ash, is collaboration, realizing that people are different, organizations, groups are different. And so we need to be really respectful and really truthful and put our conflict on the table, because each time I have done that personally with RNKE, with cross-sector partners, it's been successful because we've grown with each other. And then once we have developed that trust, then we go on to innovation and progress. So here's a little crib sheet that is the sum of 20 years of working on R&K related work. I can't say that that's the only thing that I've been doing, one side of A4, but I won't go through this. But if you look at a reflective and active approach to learning, always consider 4 things. Why are we doing things? What are we doing? How are we doing things? And when are we doing things? Because with the why, it's important that we have the motivation and we know why everyone around the table is working towards a goal. What are we doing? Now, there's always that issue between perception and reality. Remember what I said right at the beginning? In that we need to understand together what needs to be done, what people want, and what's expected of the research in KE. The how, remember what I said at the beginning about it's not just the journey, but it's not just the end, but the means, the journey that's important. How is not just operational, it's very much values-based. The when. I think this is something that we don't always notice, but I was having a conversation with a colleague 2 weeks ago, and they said actually sometimes when our stakeholders feel a little bit icy towards us, it's not because we've done anything wrong as such, but we have failed to understand R&KE as relationship building, not just doing the project, but building ongoing relationships with other parts of our organization. So in terms of creating good RKE and long-term benefits where partners can work with us again and again, there are a few things that we have to remember. Cultural sensitivity. What does success look like for everybody? What's the added value? Consider what partners would actually like to achieve, not just what we want to achieve. Creating relationships and contacts with our institution. For example, I focus a lot on RKE, but I'm speaking a lot of the time to education, the student experience, student union, EDI advisors, as well as corporate partners, SMEs, who work quite regularly with the university. So I'm always thinking, after a certain relationship ends, where can I point the people that I've worked with? On conflict again, don't avoid conflict, try working with it. And I want to open the floor up. And this is probably not for this discussion now, but I want you to think about tips that you could give everyone around the table here about how we can do cross-sector, cross-industry and cross-organizational R&KE better. And thus endeth my presentation.
Thank you. If anyone's got any questions for Susanna, if you want to pop them in the Q&A at the top, and Susanna can answer before we flip over to Fraser. Or alternately, we could go with Fraser, and then at the end we could do like a tag team Q&A. It gives people time to kind of absorb and think of questions and pop them in, if that's okay. We have got one in there at the minute from Helen. Have you had experiences where the culture of organisations clash, and how have you handled that?
Oh, really good, tough question, Helen. Thank you. Okay. Yes, I have. And it was actually two higher education institutes that, I mean, there were two universities around, no, three universities around the table. Two particular teams didn't get on from different universities. There were social enterprises, community representatives, etc. I think in terms of the conflict and how I handled it, my focus was to look at almost divert attention away from the teams that were arguing and actually focus on something that was a mum and apple pie area, which was community self-empowerment and particularly kind of health and social innovation. And by helping all of the teams to work together on kind of grassroots health and well-being and the use of the green environment, those two conflicting teams realized that life was bigger than their particular fiefdoms. And so they quickly, within, I think, the space of about 6 weeks, realized that life was bigger and they had to get on with one another in order to stay part of the project. So I think that diversion technique is quite a good one. It doesn't always work, but it's important that where there's conflict, we look at points of unity and help people to get together around something that they all agree is good.
Any more questions for Susanna? Let's pop them in the Q&A at the top. Shall we move on to Fraser, and then, as I say, at the end, as more questions come in, we can do a tag team approach. Oh, thank you. So I'll hand over to Fraser.
Thank you, Ellen. And thank you, Susanna.
It's a pleasure.
Thoroughly enjoyed the idea of conflict as a stepping stone to growth. That's a new concept for me. I love that. Just before I start, I mentioned this to a few folks earlier in previous meetings today. I've had fireworks appear within my Teams screen for some reason. So don't be alarmed if you see fireworks going off. It's not me trying to explain something. So I'm going to talk to you about a project that we've developed within the College of Arts and Humanities here at the University of Glasgow, called the Arts and Humanities Partnership Catalyst. I think Susanna and I have probably been in this business, if you want to call it that, for probably a similar length of time, around about 20 years. And I've always been working within the interface, if you like, between university research and the non-academic community. So I've always had a brokering role, if you like. And over the last 17, 18 years, one of the observations I took away from this is something that Susanna also picked up on, and it's that of parachuting in academics, parachuting into partner organisations and delivering a project, if you like. And that's something that it works for the HEI, and it doesn't always work for the non-academic partner. And the reason for that is because it's driven by the academic curiosity, which is a good thing. But these sort of things, they are rarely in line with the non-academic partner strategic goals. So that can cause challenges a bit further down the line. So a few years back, we decided to try flipping the more traditional model on its head and thinking about what the sector needs were. And what we thought about was, okay, so what are the sectors we want to focus on? And these kind of stemmed from areas that we had research strengths within. And we went outside the university, pulled together quite a significant network in each of the sectors, and basically identified what it was that they needed, where their challenges lie. And the catalyst approach is probably quite unique to anything else that's been done that I'm aware of, because we are using design-led innovation practice within the programme. So as you can imagine, bringing together experts from outside the university in all different fields, but within a given sector, you're creating what's really quite a complex system. So it's great to have conversations around these, but unless they're structured and they're using design-led research tools, it can often, you can get the key messages lost within the noise of those discussions. So what we have done is created a project which is in partnership with Glasgow School of Art. So the lead from Glasgow School of Art is Michael Johnson. He is an Innovation Leadership Fellow. My lead is Kirsty Wild, and I run a team with 2 Knowledge Exchange associates. And between Michael and myself, we have a shared person, Gaston Velish, who is the community innovation practitioner. We also have the added benefit of having member staff from the research office, which joins us on each individual catalyst that we do. So what does a catalyst look like? It operates essentially in 3 main parts, which firstly is to identify who it is that we're going to work with, both internal and externally. We then apply this group, we go through 3 sets of activities, which basically hone in and understanding what the challenges are that exist within the sector. Attempting to establish an ecosystem which is on a language that everybody understands. And that's something, again, Susanna pointed to, and it's really important. If you imagine the double diamond representation of project formation, part of the very first point of contact here is to deconstruct everybody's ideas as they exist and then reconstruct them on a platform which everybody understands. So that's what we do within the first one. Within the second one, we start to explore thematic areas. And what these do is they lead to opportunities which we can flag within the network. At this point, we always have a review to ensure that we're going the right direction. And we then use what came out of Catalyst 2 and the review to inform final projects that we can start to develop outside of the Catalyst environment itself. So once we've completed this section, what we didn't actually anticipate creating, but what we created was sustainable networks, which were alive and beating, not based on projects. And that was just something that was really of interest to us, because getting past that challenge of project-based partnership is absolutely the key. If you can develop sustainable networks that are operating not on a project basis, that are dynamic and their people are talking to each other, that is the biggest challenge that we're currently faced with, I believe. So that's the Catalyst process itself. Apologies for rattling through this quite quickly. This is a pretty busy slide. A few of them are. But I'll pull out the bits that I think are important. Firstly, we work within admin. So I think everybody on the call is admin rather than academic. But what we are doing is research in this field of knowledge exchange, design-led knowledge exchange. It is new. Design-led innovation tools have been around for a long time. Knowledge exchange has been around for a long time, but that crossover between the two is relatively fresh. We're doing research in the area. As such, we secured funding from the AHRC for a community innovation practitioner, and that's Gaston. And we have also secured funding from the Scottish Funding Council to look into the commercialisation of this, but I can talk a little bit more about this further down the line. Currently, we have 4 catalysts active. The first is digital cultural heritage, the second food, looking at sustainability, health, heritage and tourism. The third was mental health and well-being, and the fourth, which is a bit different from the other 3, and I'll explain more about that in a minute, is with an area in Glasgow called Govan, and in particular a building of heritage value called Govan Old Church. These numbers have actually gone up because I took stock just after the first 3, but these have now gone up a bit. But externally, we've got around about, if I remember rightly, it's about 65, 70 individual organisations involved in the Catalyst. And from an internal perspective, we have now probably over 50 academics involved, and they're from all 4 colleges within the university. So we're breaking ground in a number of different ways, but one of them is in developing transdisciplinary research, which is something that's really important to the university. Something that we've discovered is common across the 4 catalysts is a requirement for sector-wide mapping and sector-wide communication. So we are currently working on tools to navigate past these. So digital cultural heritage, I won't go into this in too much detail, but I thought it'd be useful for you to get a scale of the networks that we were creating. So as you can see, there's some quite large organisations. In fact, we've got some of the largest heritage organisations in Scotland involved. The National Trust, Historic Environment, Museums, Galleries Scotland are the ones that set the strategies and the guidance for all museums and galleries in Scotland, as the name would suggest. The National Museums of Scotland. Glasgow Life is, I believe, the biggest council-run organisation within Europe. And we have them on board, V&A and Dundee, as well as some really small micro-level companies. So it's, as you can imagine, these initial conversations with these folks were really quite fascinating. And it actually led us to change our processes, because I think that's been really critical to the growth of the Catalyst. We didn't create a process in the first instance and we've applied it right across the board. We're going through a constant phase of iteration. I wouldn't need you to dwell on this too much, but in this part in the next slides, it looks the same, but it gives you a different outline of the process that we applied. That's a view of one of the tools that we use. We sit round tables with 5 or 6 people and we work around these tools. We go post-it daft. And then we take the post-its and the posters away, and then we synthesize common themes from these, and that informs what happens at the next Catalyst. And the digital cultural heritage, these are the examples of the themes that came through. And from these, we got a number of proof of concept type projects that were in the process of scaling up. As you can see, we started this back in May 22, and the formal part of the Catalyst concluded March last year. So that's 10 months all in. And which project is it? This project here, the Heritage Mapping Project, that has only just become funded now. So that gives you an indication that this is still a very much a live network. This project here is just starting to bubble to the surface. Some of these are completed. Some of these have gone way past the point of that we generated through the Catalyst. But the important thing is that the networks are very much alive, as I said. Moving on to food. Again, we've got some really large organisations based within Scotland, Scottish Government, for example, National Trust, down to some really small organisations like Slow Food Scotland, individual organisations. Rachel's a broadcaster and journalist. Outer Hebrides, got Glasgow Life on board. Again, you can see that we've got the other colleges within the university involved. This was a very different Catalyst. We didn't get small projects out of this. What we discovered was that the entire sector wanted to contribute to activity-based work. The first of these was the development of the Scottish Food Library. So most of the folks that came along said they didn't really know what was happening across the sector. And that included the government. And the government, we worked with the government to put together the local Food for Everyone strategy. We informed the local Food for Everyone strategy. And we've also been involved in the development of a symposium that brought together quite a lot of the largest food providers within Scotland. So the Scottish Food Library has gone through its first iteration, and it looked like this. It looked like a document, but as you can possibly imagine, documents are not much use in this situation, because as soon as you've hit the save button, it's out of date. So what we're working on is the development of a platform that pulls information in a dynamic way from other existing networks and databases and collections. So people that are accessing the platform can create their own version of what the Scottish Food Library looks like. I'm going to move on swiftly. The Mental Health and Wellbeing Network has grown beyond anything that we anticipated. It's probably our largest network. We started that in September, and the formal part of it concluded in January. So we got this down to 6 months in this process. And here we actually did things quite differently. And we discovered a far more swift way to get to the information we were looking for. So we've been experimenting with process along the line, and landing on this version of the process has been really successful. What we have done here is used idea wall type activity to develop the themes from which the projects have grown. We have members of the Scottish Parliament involved in this catalyst. They sit within Culture Counts, which controls both the creative economy and culture and communities areas, and therefore we can actively put ideas and concepts to be discussed within Parliament, which is a quite powerful position to be in. So we work with quite a lot of the really small organisations that the NHS use as referral organisations, if you like, and they tell us what's not working. The folks within Parliament, the policy setters, don't actually know what's not working. For example, they put out funding calls on a regular basis that are for these small grassroots organisations. But the fundamental flaw within these funding opportunities is that they will only fund new things. So every 2 years they come around and they'll fund a new thing for another 2 years. The problem is it takes 2 years to set a project up. It then becomes something that's functional and delivering good, but the government won't fund it again beyond that point. So you have to remold and you have to rebirth, if you like, to come up with something new. So that's something that we're currently putting to the cross-parliamentary groups at the moment. Governald. So we're currently in the middle of Governald. Actually, we've got the final part of that, which is assemble next week. This is a different project where before we've been looking at sectors. We wanted to try the concept of a mini catalyst, which takes place over 3 months. And the reason that this is different, because rather than having sectors and we're finding out what the challenges are from multiple organisations, instead we're looking at a single entity, which is Govan Heritage Trust. They own the building, which is called Govan Old. Govan Old used to be a church, which is in the south side of the river. And believe it or not, the church used to finance the University of Glasgow many, many years ago. So hopefully we're going to be reversing that. The main thing about the church is that it holds the world's largest collection of Viking hogbacks. So there's real heritage value within Govan Old Church. However, it doesn't currently have funding. It doesn't currently have the degree of community buy-in that it would like. And the building itself hasn't become self-sufficient. So what we're doing is pulling the catalyst process and ideas, pulling the community and all the different organisations that should have a say on what happens next with Govan Old. We're pulling all those together and going through our processes and coming up with sets of recommendations and guidance for funding opportunities that are on the horizon. So coming to the close, what's the Catalyst actually delivering? It's delivering a lot of stuff that we didn't really anticipate, and as such, the processes that we've developed are actually being adopted across the university in a number of different ways. But for us, the key that it's delivering is partnership development. And this was a lot of the stuff that Susanna was touching on before, having sustainable networks that trust and that develop not on a project basis, I think, is the key thing here. And these networks are able to access the research that's been developed within the university for an actual sectoral need rather than a push from the university outwards, which is the traditional way that I've always worked. One of the really cool things about this way of working is that we've created networks that are funding ready, if you like. How often do you get to the position where you see a call coming out that really fits your research strengths like a glove, but you don't really have the network in place? Well, we're creating the networks. We're actively looking for funding. We're actively lobbying the funders when we see that activities slipped through the gaps, which the funders actually want. But we're also ready to react. We've created new reproducible methods, and that's purely through the integration of our colleagues at Glasgow School of Art and their design innovation methodologies. These are being integrated across the university, as I mentioned previously. I think one of the more important things, though, is the culture change that's arisen through Catalyst activity, and that's driving transdisciplinary working across the university. Curiosity, enthusiasm, and opportunity. I think 3 absolutely fabulous words, but these are really the outputs that are being driven from the Catalyst, and we're getting more and more interest in it. At the start, I mentioned investment. That's my timer. Investment to explore the commercial potential of this. We've spoken to a couple of institutes already. We are preparing ourselves to roll out mini versions of the Catalyst, so the Govan version of the Catalyst to smaller focus groups. We can also run full Catalyst, looking at broad sectors that universities are interested in working with. A lot of the time, the processes that we're using are uncovering cross-disciplinary opportunities that weren't initially noticeable through the more traditional routes of observation within the universities. And we're also offering training in this area that we're operating currently. So many thanks for inviting me along. I'm a bit of an interloper here because I'm not part of the Midlands. I really appreciate you inviting me along today. If you're interested in any of this stuff, if you think the Catalyst would be of interest to your institution, drop me an email, and I would be delighted to have any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Fraser. Again, if we pop them in the Q&A and Fraser can answer them, and if any apply to Susanna, she picks them up as well.
Susanna, I didn't realise our talks were going to be synergistic.
Well, there you go. That's good R&K.
Indeed.
I'm glad that they are.
Can you see the questions in the chat? I mean, there's one about ethics, Jackie. I don't know if that's one, and then I can see that Lawrence has got his hand up.
Sorry, I don't seem to be able to see that for some reason.
Yeah, so Jackie's question is, different sectors and organisations have different ethical protocols. If we're working with anyone, we often implement our university ethical processes, which are often slower and more bureaucratic. Do you think it's time to update our ethics processes to reflect that role of engagement of universities now? Do either of you have a view?
I can put some ideas forwards. But I'm going to ask Fraser, do you have any ideas and thoughts?
Equality, diversity and inclusion has been a massive part of, I think, all university life now moving forward, and very much it should be. And we are using EDI forums to advise on ethics as we develop projects. So we have groups of people who, from really diverse areas within the university, that we can speak to about projects as they unroll. And it's absolutely fabulous because you get views from people on, okay, these are the things that you should be thinking about in moving forward. But we're always open to new ways of engaging, and with different groups that we haven't engaged with before, we're always interested in hearing people's ideas and concepts around that. I don't think it should ever stop that we continue to grow in that area.
Thank you. Lawrence, you've got your hand up.
I'll just need to unmute him. That should work now.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for both speakers. That was really fascinating. That was definitely really worth my time today. It was great. Thanks, both of you.
Pleasure. Good to meet you, Lawrence.
I guess I've got a couple of things. I stuck one in the chat around how you deal with power imbalances. Okay. So obviously when you're working with any group of, especially if you're academics working with industry or working with funders or we're working with charities, we deal with a power imbalance in the room, and that can make monologue if we're not very careful. How do you deal with both speakers, please?
Okay. I'll answer Jackie's question, also Lawrence's in one, because I said I promised to respond to Jackie's. So in relation to ethics, I mean, I'm not in charge of ethics. I'm professional services and not in faculty, but I have worked with really strict ethics because some of the things I've done in the past have related to vulnerable people and kind of health. But as a university, I think we should be more inclusive in terms of almost having flex ethics according to context and partnerships, and almost different levels of ethical criteria, so that we're within a framework, but we don't have the tail wagging the dog for a small project that's going to be low risk with massive medical ethics involved or something like that, just because we're in a faculty. In terms of Lawrence and the power imbalance conundrum, I think all of us around the room have seen it. I'll give two almost approaches that have kind of worked really, really well. First is that when we have a power imbalance with, I think typically the university sitting at the top as the experts or something like that, and actually that's not right. We are, as University of Nottingham, really looking at the power and the authority of those with lived experience, who are not always us sitting in our universities. So it's to understand expertise, widen the definition of what we count as expertise around the table of partners. Another thing in terms of, I think a practical point in terms of addressing the power imbalance is having us as RKE folks from universities actually go out to local communities. I did this when I was at my previous university, which is Birmingham City University in Birmingham. We spent a lot of time in areas of Birmingham, such as Ladyword or Black Country by Cape Hill, former brewery, Midlands Metropolitan Hospital, Handsworth, those are areas if you know Birmingham. More or less inner city areas, working with communities and actually saying, we respect this is your turf, you are the experts. And I think that really, really helped us to level the playing field between all of us, because I think at the start of the particular program I worked on, there were massive power imbalances as the project was kind of driven by the city council and universities, whereas we very quickly had multi-locational collaboration sites, and that helped people to think about things very differently. Sorry, very verbose, but I hope that makes sense.
From our point of view, right at the very start of the Catalyst, we've got a few documents that we use that explain to participants that everybody's on an even playing field. We don't tend to use titles and so on. Everyone that comes into the room is an expert in their field, and we reiterate that at the start of each session. When we break into the processes and tools that we use, we always operate within groups of around about 5 or 6 or 7 at most, and each of those groups are facilitated to ensure that everyone's voice is heard in an equitable way. So it's really down to the processes that we use that we ensure that there is equitable voice for everyone that comes to the programs that we run. And the last one actually in Gov and Old, and we're trying to do this more, we go out and hold the events, the activities within the areas that we're working in rather than within the university. However, we have got a pile of shiny new buildings recently, and we love to hold our events in there. I hope that answers your question, Lawrence, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's fantastic. Thank you.
I can see the questions now. They were on my phone weirdly, but it didn't refresh on the desktop. We've got one a while ago that is, if you were asked to develop research culture in a diverse organisation, where/how would you start?
Okay. I don't know, Fraser, do you want to go first? Or I can go first. I don't mind.
I think I need to think about that one. Who did that come from? I'm just looking at the questions myself. It would be useful to get her.
Ania.
I can't see that one.
Ania Zawaska.
There we go. So I'll let you go, Suzanne.
Okay then. So we're talking about research culture and diversity. I think a key thing to do because of diversity is obviously appreciate difference and not just tolerate difference, but accept it and integrate it in a really positive way, whilst going back to my presentation, understanding what conflicts could arise. I think my thoughts are not to make it carte blanche, because when we do things relating to diversity and ultimately the democratization of research, we still need a structure. So rather than just go, what does everyone want? Which never ultimately works because nothing moves forwards when a lot's articulated, is we understand the art of the possible, put forward, I suppose, things that we, almost like a straw person, things that we think we ought to achieve, and things that we define as success, and use those as constructive debating points for building a more diverse, I suppose, research culture, research strategy. A little bit abstract, but essentially we can't do free form and just what do you want, because there's a risk of not achieving or underachieving on what we do. But to use a few questions to start a debate and to also agree on some principles of trust and confidentiality and support, I think. So whilst you've got the systems there, it's important to embrace, I suppose, that, the respect of fellow human beings.
I don't think there's anything that I would add to that, Suzanne. I think it's always difficult to have a starting point in a diverse organisation, especially with something as huge as research culture. But hopefully the organisation would have a rough idea of the direction of travel they'd like to go in, and that would be the first starting point to hang things around.
I'm conscious of time, just in case people have got meetings they've got to get to. There are 2 questions that haven't been answered, but maybe I can ping these to you via email, Susanna and Fraser, and then get a response. Then I can circulate it to the group with the recording and whatnot.
Absolutely. And just a quick one, I've realised Fraser's done it because he's very conscientious, but I forgot. If anybody would like to contact me, I'm happy if, Ellen, if you want to give my email out. I'm on LinkedIn, but if you want to give my email out, I'm happy to collaborate with others, learn from you all as well, because I've been speaking a lot, but this is not a one-way process. This is a dialogue and collaboration. So please feel welcome to contact me.
Thank you. Thanks again to Fraser and Susanna for presenting. It's been really interesting, and there seems to be a lot of kind of engagement, interest and appreciation for what you've done today. And thank you to attendees for taking your time out to attend. I will circulate, as I said, the questions that weren't answered to give a bit more insight into those from Fraser and Susanna, and I'll also circulate the meeting recording and details of speakers just to further kind of engagement. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, folks. Have a great day.